You're not lazy, you're just lost. Carl Jung's darkest truth. Have you ever looked at yourself and thought, why can't I do anything? The weight of the day presses on you like 1,000 invisible hands, and yet you do nothing. People call it laziness. You start to believe them. But deep down, something tells you that's not the whole story. Carl Jung, one of the most profound minds in modern psychology, believed that what we call laziness often masks something much darker, much more tragic: the soul's cry for meaning in a world that no longer makes sense. Jung didn't see idleness as a flaw to be fixed, but as a message to be decoded. When your goals feel empty, your efforts pointless, and your life misaligned with your true self, the psyche shuts down. Not because you're weak, but because a part of you knows you're walking the wrong path. The truth is, you're not lazy, you're lost. And the worst part? The more you try to force yourself forward without understanding this inner conflict, the more exhausted, paralyzed, and disconnected you become. In this video, we'll dive into the depths of Jung's psychology to uncover the real reason you feel stuck, and what you must do to wake up from this sleepwalking life. If you've ever felt broken, unmotivated, or like a stranger in your own skin, this message is for you. So if you value deep truths that can change the way you see yourself forever, hit that like button, subscribe, and activate the notification bell. It helps more than you think, and it might just help someone else who feels just as lost as you. Topic 1: The mask of laziness. Laziness is one of the most misunderstood states of being in modern culture. We condemn it, mock it, and use it as a label for failure. But Jung would argue that laziness isn't the disease, it's the symptom. What appears as inertia on the outside may actually be a profound misalignment on the inside. When the conscious mind sets goals disconnected from the deeper needs of the soul, the body resists. You find yourself unable to move, not because you lack discipline, but because your entire being senses that what you're chasing is hollow. This is not failure. It is a protective paralysis. We call people lazy when they don't conform to societal expectations. But Jung teaches us to question, what if those expectations are the real problem? What if your psyche refuses to cooperate not because it's weak, but because it's wise? What if this laziness is your soul's protest? Imagine trying to sail toward a destination your heart doesn't believe in. You'll sabotage yourself. You'll procrastinate, not out of weakness but because some part of you knows, this isn't the life you were meant to live. And in that silent resistance, you're not broken, you're being honest. Jung believed that the psyche is self-regulating. When it encounters danger, even spiritual danger, it activates defenses. Laziness can be one of them. The refusal to act becomes a quiet form of survival, a way to stop before the self is lost completely. This kind of laziness isn't about being tired. It's about being disconnected. From meaning, from inner truth, from soul. You can sleep for 10 hours and still feel exhausted when your life has no direction that resonates with who you really are. In our achievement-obsessed culture, we glorify hustle and demonize stillness. But sometimes, doing nothing is not apathy. It's the psyche's way of saying, pause. Something's not right. You're not on the path your soul was designed to walk. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, nothing inside you lights up? That's not laziness. That's existential misalignment. It's a compass pointing not north, but inward. A demand for honesty, for a deeper reevaluation of where you're going and why. We shame people into action, thinking pressure will fix them. But Jung knew the truth. Pressure without understanding only deepens the disconnect. It creates a false self, a persona that acts but does not believe, that moves but without soul. Real laziness, the kind that matters, is not solved by productivity hacks. It is only healed by reconnecting with purpose. You can't outwork your inner emptiness. You have to descend into it, understand it, and let it teach you what you've been avoiding. Jung's work calls us to look beneath the label. Stop asking, why am I lazy? And start asking, what is my soul trying to say? Because until you hear that message, nothing will change. Not permanently. You are not a failure because you're stuck. You are not broken because you're lost. You are simply disconnected from something vital, and until you find it, your spirit will resist anything less. So next time you feel lazy, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Listen. Ask yourself, what part of me is refusing to go forward, and why? The answer might not be comfortable, but it will be true. If this resonates with you, drop a comment. What has laziness meant in your life? And could it be something deeper? Topic 2. The fragmented self. Jung believed that the greatest tragedy of the modern individual is fragmentation. We are split between the self we show to the world and the self we bury deep inside. This fracture creates confusion, exhaustion, and yes, the sensation of being lazy. You weren't born divided. You became that way. Through expectations, roles, and repeated acts of self-denial, you learned to put on a mask. You became what others needed, not what your soul truly is. Over time, the mask hardened into your identity. This is the root of inner fatigue. Not physical tiredness, but the exhaustion of pretending. Of waking up each day and becoming someone you're not, just to be accepted, just to survive. The more distant you grow from your true self, the heavier every step becomes. Laziness, in this context, is rebellion. The body refuses to move forward as a false self. The soul refuses to generate energy for a life that betrays it. It's not laziness, it's a sacred no. The problem is, we don't recognize this fragmentation. We blame ourselves. We internalize the pain as weakness. But what if this pain is trying to guide you back to your wholeness? What if the part of you that can't function is simply tired of lying? Jung taught that the path to healing begins with integration. To see every part of you, even the ones you've rejected. Especially those. Until then, your motivation will always be borrowed, forced, artificial. The fragmented self lives in conflict. The conscious mind wants one thing, but the unconscious wants another. Every action becomes a battlefield. You try to work, and you stall. You try to focus, and your mind flees. This is not failure. This is misalignment. Reclaiming energy begins with honesty. Who are you trying to be, and who are you really? The closer these two become, the more natural your actions will feel. Real momentum comes not from pressure, but from inner truth. But we're scared. Integration means facing the parts of us we've hidden. The rage, the shame, the longing. We'd rather keep pretending, even if it costs us our vitality, even if it drains our soul. Yet there comes a moment when you can't fake it anymore. The mask starts to crack. The exhaustion becomes unbearable. And that's when the real work begins. Not to become something new, but to remember who you were before the world told you to forget. The fragmented self cannot create a meaningful life. It can only perform. And performance, no matter how convincing, will never give you peace. You must bring your parts home. In Jungian terms, this is the journey toward individuation, becoming whole again. The more you reclaim yourself, the more your energy returns. Not from the outside, but from within. Have you ever felt like you're two different people, one alive in secret, the other dead in public? Let's talk about it in the comments. That split may be the key to understanding your laziness. Topic 3: The Shadow's Hidden Grip. There is a side of you that you don't want to admit exists, and Jung called it the shadow. It holds everything you've rejected, denied, or deemed unacceptable. But here's the paradox. The more you reject your shadow, the more power it has over your life. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. In fact, it grows stronger. It seeps into your actions, hijacks your moods, and fuels your behaviors in ways you don't understand. And one of its favorite disguises? Laziness. Unacknowledged guilt, suppressed anger, hidden desires, all of them live in the shadow. And when left unexamined, they become anchors that drag you down, draining your will to move. Not because you're broken, but because you're carrying a psychic weight too heavy to bear. You don't just lose motivation, you lose clarity. You can't tell what you want, what you fear, or where you're going. You become foggy, confused, paralyzed. But behind that paralysis is a war inside, a war between who you think you should be and who you actually are. Jung believed that the only way out is through. The shadow must be faced, not feared. It holds the parts of you that were exiled, and sometimes those parts hold the key to your strength, your vitality, your creative fire. But this confrontation is terrifying. It means seeing your darkness, owning your flaws, admitting the things you swore you'd never admit. Most people would rather stay lazy than face that kind of pain. But the price is spiritual decay. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your unlived life, the potential you've disowned, the feelings you were taught to suppress. Until you welcome it, you'll remain divided, and division is the true root of paralysis. When you say, "I don't know why I'm like this," the shadow whispers, "I do." And until you listen, you'll keep repeating the same patterns, over and over again, mistaking them for personality. Laziness, in this light, becomes a map, a signpost. It says, something in your unconscious is screaming for attention. Something buried is begging to be seen. It's not a curse. It's a clue. Start with honesty. What are you hiding from yourself? What feelings do you not allow? What truths do you fear would make you unlovable? There's your shadow and there's your path. To live with the shadow is to live in truth. To deny it is to live in fragments. One leads to vitality, the other to numbness. The choice is yours, but the cost of avoidance is your energy, your clarity, your peace. So when the energy disappears, don't just blame yourself. Ask, what am I not facing? What have I left in the dark? The answer may be uncomfortable, but it will be liberating. Have you ever felt like there's something inside holding you back, but you can't name it? That might be your shadow speaking. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Topic 4 of the exile of the soul. There is a kind of silence that isn't peaceful, it's hollow. It fills the space where your soul once lived, echoing with the absence of meaning. Jung warned that when the soul is exiled from our daily life, what follows is not freedom, but inner collapse. You might look alive. You might go to work, answer messages, even smile. But something inside is missing. A voice that once guided you now whispers so faintly, you can barely hear it. And without that voice, you drift. Not out of laziness, but from disconnection. Modern life worships the surface, but the soul lives in depth. It longs for meaning, not efficiency. Connection, not performance. And when we abandon it for the sake of productivity, it doesn't retaliate, it retreats. This retreat feels like numbness, like emptiness, like every step you take is through fog. You try to push through, but nothing moves. You try to motivate yourself, but no fire comes. This isn't a problem of effort, it's a crisis of being. Jung believed that the soul is not a metaphor, it is a reality. When your actions are no longer rooted in the truth of your being, your energy collapses. The soul does not lend itself to inauthentic tasks. It resists them with silence. The exile of the soul doesn't happen all at once. It begins with small compromises, saying yes when you mean no, chasing approval instead of purpose, numbing your intuition. Over time, these betrayals compound until you forget what truth even feels like. And then, one day, you wake up unable to move. Not because you're lazy, but because your soul no longer recognizes the life you're living. You've become a stranger to yourself, and the body, in its wisdom, refuses to continue. This refusal is sacred. It is the soul's last line of defense. It's not punishment. It's a call. A whisper that says, "Come home. Remember. Reclaim the life you were meant to live." But coming home is terrifying. It means undoing years of conditioning. It means facing the pain of what you've abandoned. It means listening to the voice you silenced long ago, and letting it speak. The return of the soul cannot be forced. It must be invited. And that invitation begins with stillness, with stopping, with letting yourself feel the grief of your own disappearance. Many people fear this moment. They fear that if they stop pretending, everything will fall apart. But the truth is, everything already has. What you're feeling is the ache of a life lived without soul, and the beginning of one that's about to be reclaimed. When you feel unable to act, consider this. Maybe your soul has been exiled for too long. Maybe what you call laziness is really grief. And maybe that grief is sacred, a doorway to transformation. Have you ever felt like you're just going through the motions, like your life is happening without you? Tell us in the comments. Your experience might help someone else find their way back. Topic 5. The death of meaning. Jung believed that modern man suffers not from too much suffering, but from meaninglessness. When life loses its depth, when actions become mechanical, and when existence is stripped of mystery, the spirit begins to rot. And we mistake that rot for laziness. Meaning is not optional. It is fuel. Without it, the psyche collapses. You can have every tool for success, every reason to keep going, but if you don't feel connected to something deeper, your motivation will dry up like a riverbed in drought. We try to substitute meaning with distraction, endless scrolling, shallow pleasures, cheap highs. But the soul cannot be fooled. It knows when you're lying. It knows when you're playing small. It knows when you're starving and pretending you're full. Jung saw this especially in people who had everything: status, wealth, opportunity, but no reason to get out of bed, no fire, no pull from the depth, because their life was built on what they were told to want, not what their soul actually needed. The death of meaning doesn't feel like a dramatic collapse. It feels like slow erosion, like apathy, like days that blur together, like waking up and wondering why. You function, but you are not alive. You act, but you are not present. And yet, no one tells you this is a crisis. They tell you to work harder, get more organized, be more grateful. But none of those things can fill the hole left by lost purpose. The ache is not in your habits, it's in your spirit. Jung believed that regaining meaning requires a descent into the unconscious, into the mythic, into the symbolic life. It means reconnecting with something larger than yourself. Not necessarily religion, but something sacred. This sacredness could be a calling, a creative fire, a deep love, a moral battle. Something that pierces the surface and pulls you into the depth. Without it, you will always feel tired. Not because you're lazy, but because you are spiritually malnourished. We don't need more motivation. We need more meaning. We don't need more pressure. We need more truth. And truth, Jung reminds us, is not something you find on the surface. You must descend to retrieve it. That descent is scary. It asks you to abandon the familiar and embrace the unknown. But on the other side is vitality, the kind of energy that doesn't have to be forced. It flows naturally when you live in alignment with your inner world. The tragedy of modernity is that we've replaced meaning with metric. We value what can be measured, not what can be felt. But your soul doesn't care about data. It cares about depth. It lives where the numbers end. So when you feel lazy, ask yourself this: what do I truly care about? What would I die for, if anything? And if nothing comes to mind, then maybe that's where your work must begin. Have you ever felt that your life lacked meaning, even when everything looked fine from the outside? Let's talk about it. Your comment might be someone else's lifeline. Topic 6. The Awakening Path. There comes a moment when the weight becomes unbearable, and you realize you can't keep pretending. This is the moment of awakening. Jung called it the turning point of transformation, when suffering becomes so loud that it forces you to change. It begins not with strength, but with surrender. A moment of brutal honesty. You admit you are lost. You admit you are tired. You admit that whatever you've been doing is no longer working, and in that moment, something cracks open. This cracking is painful. It feels like death, and in a way it is. The death of the false self. The collapse of illusions. The crumbling of the persona you've spent years building. But in that death, something real begins to stir. Jung taught that suffering is not the enemy, it is the guide. It shows you where you've betrayed yourself, where you've strayed from your path, where your soul has been begging to be seen. As you begin to listen, a new voice emerges. Faint at first, unfamiliar. It's not the voice of who you think you should be, it's the voice of who you really are. And for the first time in a long time, you feel something inside you move. This movement is small, subtle, a spark. You won't be healed overnight, but you'll feel the difference between forced action and natural momentum, between obligation and calling. And that's where true energy begins to return. The awakening path is not linear. Some days you'll feel alive again. Others, you'll fall back into numbness. This is normal. Healing isn't a staircase, it's a spiral. You revisit old wounds, but each time with more awareness, more strength, more truth. As you walk this path, you'll start noticing signs, dreams, synchronicities, unexpected clarity. Jung called this the symbolic life, when your inner world and outer world begin to reflect each other, guiding you home. You'll begin to say no to what drains you, yes to what nourishes you. You'll stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What is true for me?" And that shift will change everything. There will be grief, for the time you lost, for the self you abandoned, but there will also be joy. Not the surface kind, the deep, quiet joy of remembering who you are. Jung didn't promise ease. He promised depth, and depth always comes with darkness. But in that darkness, you'll find your fire, not the frantic fire of ambition, but the steady flame of purpose. This is the path back to life. Not a life of productivity, but a life of presence. Not a life of noise, but of meaning. And it begins the moment you stop running and start listening. Have you felt yourself awakening lately, even if just a little? Share it below. Even the smallest shift is worth celebrating. Topic 7 of the Return to Wholeness. The journey Jung invites us to take is not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. Wholeness doesn't mean being happy all the time. It means becoming real. Integrating the broken, the beautiful, the shadowed and the shining, all of it. When you reclaim the parts of yourself that you exiled, your energy returns. Not the anxious energy of survival, but the grounded presence of truth. You begin to act not from pressure, but from alignment. And suddenly, life doesn't feel so heavy. Wholeness is not a state you arrive at. It's a way of being, a commitment to live in truth, even when it's painful. A willingness to face what you used to avoid, to feel what you used to numb, to love what you used to hide. And here's the paradox. The more you embrace your darkness, the less power it has over you. You don't have to pretend anymore. You don't have to perform. You simply are. And in that state, laziness disappears. Not because you're always productive, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. Jung believed that the goal of life is individuation, to become who you truly are. This isn't about ego. It's about essence. When you live from that essence, your actions are not chores. They are expressions of your soul. This kind of life is slower, quieter, but more vivid. You'll start noticing beauty again, feeling gratitude again, experiencing wonder in places you once ignored. Because your attention is no longer scattered, it's rooted in presence. Even your struggles change. They don't disappear, but they become meaningful. You suffer with awareness. You rest without guilt. You act with clarity. This is the return to wholeness, not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a deeper one. There is no final arrival point, no moment where you become fixed. But there is a rhythm you begin to feel, a harmony between your inner and outer world. And in that harmony, you find a kind of peace that no achievement could ever bring. Your life becomes a mirror of your truth, and every day you choose to live in alignment or abandon. That choice, repeated 1,000 times, shapes the texture of your existence. You are not lazy. You never were. You were lost, fragmented, disconnected. And now, slowly, piece by piece, you are returning to yourself. That return is the most important thing you'll ever do. You won't always get it right. Some days you'll still fall. But now you know how to return. You've heard the voice of your soul, and once heard, it can never be forgotten. So keep going. Not to become better, but to become whole. Not to impress others, but to honor yourself. That is the essence of Jung's darkest, deepest truth. Have you felt yourself returning to wholeness in any area of life? Share your reflections in the comments. Your words might inspire someone else's first step. You were never lazy. You were calling yourself back to life. So now you see, what you called laziness was never the enemy. It was the invitation, a silent, sacred protest from your soul, begging you to stop, to feel, to return. Jung didn't shame this stillness, he honored it. Because sometimes, refusing to move is the bravest act of all. You weren't broken. You were misaligned. You weren't weak. You were tired of living someone else's story. And the exhaustion, the paralysis, the fog, they were signs, not of failure, but of a deeper intelligence inside you trying to wake you up. Now you have the tools, the insight, the truth. You understand the role of the shadow, the cost of fragmentation, the ache of meaninglessness, and the beauty of your return to wholeness. This is not just psychology, it's a spiritual path, and it's only just beginning. If this journey spoke to you, let your presence be felt. Like this video to show the algorithm that truth matters. Subscribe if you want more content that dives beneath the surface. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next soul-level insight. And most importantly, share this with someone who's been calling themselves lazy for far too long. They might be closer to waking up than they think.